Iran has just engineered what will go down in military history as a terminal strategic suicide. By deliberately placing neutral tankers, including a South Korean cargo vessel, under the open threat of destruction, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps abandoned all diplomatic pretense. They effectively transformed the Strait of Hormuz from a global transit artery into a massive weapon aimed squarely at the neck of the global economy. It was an arrogant gamble. Tehran believed it could paralyze America's Asian allies by sealing the strait and dictating terms. But they misread the calculus of power. Instead of submission, the United States unleashed Project Freedom, pressing the button on a devastating sweeping operation that officially strips Iran of its most prized geopolitical leverage. The rules of engagement in the Middle East have been irreversibly overwritten. The era of tolerating Iranian brinkmanship in the Gulf is dead. The opening salvo of this new reality was not a skirmish. It was a calibrated display of absolute technological supremacy. According to combat reports, the first major test materialized on May 4th when two U.S. Navy destroyers, the USS Truxtun and the USS Mason, executed a forced transit through the Strait of Hormuz. This was a gauntlet. The destroyers immediately sailed into a coordinated and sustained barrage from Iranian fast attack boats, cruise missiles, and loitering munitions. But the Iranian offensive collided with an impenetrable wall of electronic warfare and kinetic interception. Not a single American hull was scratched. Every incoming threat was instantly neutralized by a multi-layered defensive umbrella supported by AH-64 Apache helicopters and fighter jets. Following this transit, the Pentagon began flooding the choke point with an unparalleled volume of firepower. Naval intelligence assessments indicate a literal wall of steel has been erected at the mouth of the strait. Nuclear-powered submarines wait silently in the black depths, their vertical launch tubes holding hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles locked onto strategic Iranian coordinates, awaiting a single misstep from Tehran. Above the surface, the sky has been blackened by more than 100 American warplanes operating from the Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, alongside 15,000 newly deployed U.S. troops. FA-18C Hornets are weaving a continuous wall of flesh and steel to counter any dangerous drone swarms in the sky. Every foreign aerial signature appearing on radar is met within seconds by the relentless lock-on of these American hunters. Just below them, A-10C Thunderbolts, flying tanks, now loiter in the airspace, their 30mm Gatling guns cycling 3,900 rounds per minute. They have a singular directive: shred Iran's infamous fast attack boat swarms into fiberglass pieces in seconds. But the true nightmare for the Revolutionary Guard is the activation of the autonomous hive. The Pentagon has deployed highly classified AI-powered autonomous systems originally engineered for the Pacific Theater, straight into the hot waters of Hormuz. We are witnessing the deployment of thousands of micro-drones wrapping the strait in an inescapable mesh. These platforms completely eliminate human error. They are capable of detecting Iranian targets and issuing autonomous kill decisions in a tenth of a second. If you want to understand the raw, unvarnished truth of modern geopolitical warfare before it hits the mainstream news cycle, hit the subscribe button. We decode the military architecture the Pentagon doesn't want broadcasted. Welcome to the tip of the spear. This technological siege is continuously fed by autonomous Malloy drones, logistical marvels building a massive aerial bridge. They shuttle heavy munitions and spare parts between warships without pause, ensuring the American killing machine never loses momentum. Multi-domain drones conduct millimeter-precise sweeps across the water, instantly relaying the slightest target deviation back to the Pentagon. The psychological damage to the Iranian forces was instantaneous. Within the first hours of this operation, up to 7 Iranian fast attack boats attempting to harass commercial vessels were sent to the dark, hot bottom of the strait. The Revolutionary Guard commanders stood helpless at their radios, listening to their units vaporize under a rain of fire. The shallow waters were left choked with shattered fiberglass and floating fireballs. This utter technological domination landed like a cold shower on Tehran's chain of command. For years, Iranian sailors were indoctrinated to believe they were invincible. Today, they are flatly refusing to embark on suicide missions in the face of this overwhelming superiority. Their morale is utterly shattered. But as the smoldering wreckage sinks to the bottom of the Gulf, an even more terrifying reality is tightening around the throat of the Iranian regime. A reality that threatens to starve them out entirely. The maritime blockade isn't just about neutralizing Iranian speedboats, it is the systematic severing of Tehran's windpipe. Currently, a total of 50 commercial vessels have been violently rerouted under this merciless maritime blockade for immediate security purposes. But the true scale of the crisis reveals a catastrophic paralysis of global transit. According to the latest intelligence briefings delivered by U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Dan Caney at the Pentagon, the numbers are staggering. More than 1,150 commercial vessels and an estimated 22,500 seafarers are currently stranded in the Persian Gulf, trapped by the chaotic ripple effects of Iran's blockade. Iran has desperately attempted to enforce its will, carrying out verifiable attacks on 9 commercial ships while launching additional strikes against the United Arab Emirates and Oman. Furthermore, following blatant ceasefire violations, Tehran directed more than 10 isolated attacks against U.S. forces. Yet, as General Caney noted, these desperate thrashings have not crossed the threshold that would require a massive, retaliatory American ground invasion. For this reason, the United States is not loosening its grip on Iran in the region at all. Massive destroyers like the USS Pinckney are patrolling the area, personally enforcing this impenetrable surface blockade. This surface superiority is paired with next-generation drone warfare overhead. Unblinking MQ-9 Reaper-armed UAVs continuously patrol the skies, quite literally rewriting the history of naval combat in narrow strategic corridors like Hormuz. These unmanned platforms secure energy transit by possessing the granular capability to detect and report even the slightest mine movement beneath the surface, feeding that data directly to demolition teams the moment it happens. As a result, Iran has now been driven into a corner, quite literally, within the very strait it had wielded for years as its greatest geopolitical leverage. Not a single foreign ship can dock at Iranian ports. Not a single domestic vessel can leave Iranian waters safely. This is not a routine patrol mission. It is a flawless strategic encirclement that imprisons Iran in its own home, reducing its room to maneuver to zero. This is where the military standoff mutates into a terminal economic failure. The comprehensive naval blockade is dragging the Iranian economy into a massive, inescapable black hole. Based on recent projections echoing analysts from Chatham House and the Financial Times, we are tracking an immediate hemorrhage of catastrophic proportions. The complete inability to export hydrocarbons is effectively vaporizing Iran's sole lifeline. Oil simply cannot be sold, and cargo ships cannot dock. This blockade cuts off an estimated daily windfall upward of $150 million. That is not just lost revenue. It is the absolute oxygen of the regime's asymmetric warfare machine. Iranian banks are watching their foreign currency reserves evaporate at a terrifying velocity, leaving the black market as the country's only bitter reality. On the international markets, the Iranian rial has plunged into a terminal freefall. The price of the U.S. dollar on the black market is reaching astronomical, never-before-seen levels within hours, effectively wiping out the purchasing power of the entire population. Cut off entirely from the international banking system, the Tehran regime is sliding into a profound, unrecoverable liquidity crisis where it cannot even pay the salaries of its civil servants. Domestic inflation and socio-economic turmoil now sit waiting like a volcano ready to violently erupt. The pent-up rage of a population entirely unable to meet even its most basic needs in the streets is beginning to shake the foundations of the regime. Intelligence assessments from Chatham House indicate that the severing of this maritime artery has triggered a cascading failure across Iran's internal supply chains. Supermarket shelves are emptying, and even deep within the capital of Tehran, food lines are rapidly descending into absolute chaos. The Tehran regime is now locked in an unwinnable, relentless war on two distinct fronts, fighting overwhelming American bombardments on one side, while confronting massive street uprisings from its own starving population on the other. The massive military apparatus that once struck fear into the entire region will begin to crumble from within, undone by the mutiny of soldiers stripped of their logistical support. Iran, which spent years confidently blackmailing the world from the edge of this strait, is now watching its own helplessness unfold. It is no longer possible for Tehran to withstand such immense technological power paired with a full-spectrum economic blockade. A shortage of military munitions, collapsing logistical lines, and vanishing oil revenues are literally eating away at the regime from the inside. Completely isolated and ostracized on the international stage, Tehran has no allies left to turn to. Time is running against Iran, as merciless and swift as the currents of Hormuz itself. The regime is fighting not only the American Navy, but also a complete economic collapse that is rapidly closing in. This unprecedented military operation is not being carried out merely to open the strait. This move is aimed at permanently ending Iran's years-long game in the Middle East. The United States has overturned the chessboard and is rewriting the rules of Hormuz. Now the eyes of the entire world are fixed on Iran, cornered and gasping for breath. But Project Freedom and this devastating naval blockade are merely the small opening act of the storm on the horizon, because the targets Washington has planned for the next phase are far more terrifying. Yet, Project Freedom and this devastating naval blockade are merely the small, suffocating opening act of the storm currently gathering on the horizon. Because the targets Washington has mathematically planned for the next phase following these preliminary moves are far more terrifying for Tehran. If Iran does not unconditionally back down, Washington may press the next major button on the military map. We are looking at a heavy wave of coordinated air and naval strikes launched via guided missiles fired from aircraft carriers and stealth warplanes. Topping this classified target list are all the strategic storage facilities Iran has barely managed to rebuild over the last decade. Most of these high-value facilities are carefully concealed underground, buried beneath tons of reinforced concrete in a desperate attempt to outlast American air superiority. But the physics of modern kinetic warfare render those passive defenses entirely obsolete. The precision-guided bunker busters sitting in America's arsenal are engineered to penetrate deep into the earth, capable of leveling these fortified vaults in absolute seconds. When a mass penetrator impacts the surface, it shears through bedrock and steel before a delayed fuse triggers the primary payload. The result is a subterranean cremation. Stockpiled munitions and strategic fuel reserves could effectively vaporize in massive chain explosions. These hidden depots, buried meters beneath the earth, could face wave after wave of unrelenting shockwaves. Naval intelligence models confirm that such facilities could be wiped clean off the map within seconds by America's advanced missiles. The second major target package in any subsequent operation would be the Iranian military bases directly tied to the security of the strait itself. In particular, the ballistic missile and unmanned aerial vehicle facilities strategically hidden around Hormuz could be obliterated before their crews even realize they are being hunted. Mobile missile launchers, painstakingly carved into mountain foothills to maximize their survivability, could be instantly neutralized by low-flying Tomahawk cruise missiles before they ever fire a single shot. Iran's much-vaunted lethal kamikaze drones, the very asymmetric weapons they have used to terrorize the region, would be reduced to ash before they can even leave their hangars, dramatically breaking the back of the IRGC's power projection. However, the most terrifying aspect of this assault isn't the high explosives. It is the total electronic lobotomy of the Iranian military. Radar stations lining the coastline could be neutralized by EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft. Striking these bases would, in an instant, drag down Iran's entire asymmetric strike capability in the region. The Growlers do not just jam signals, they actively hunt and fry the architecture of Iran's early warning systems, ripping the eyes out of the regime and ensuring American bombers operate with total impunity. But the Pentagon's gun barrels likely will not be confined to the coastline alone. In the third phase, the operational arrows would be aimed directly at the brain of the regime itself. The massive command centers deeply entrenched in Tehran and Isfahan are the ultimate prizes. This simultaneous massive air campaign could be backed by cyber and electronic strikes that completely sever the nation's military communication networks. The strategic goal would be to leave top-tier Iranian generals unable to issue even a single order to their frontline troops in the field, with every radar screen going completely dark. Because once the chain of command is definitively broken, the Iranian military will be instantly reduced to a headless, uncoordinated, asymmetric player on a highly fluid battlefield. The destruction of these central nervous systems could paralyze every internal communication and coordination channel within the Iranian military. A military force built on rigid, top-down authority fundamentally disintegrates when the top ceases to exist. Field commanders would be isolated, deaf, and blind, transforming a unified fighting force into fractured, terrified pockets of resistance, waiting to be systematically dismantled by precision strikes. Yet, even this total systematic paralysis is not the final card Washington holds. Another wave of targets could turn toward Iran's absolute last remaining lifelines to the outside world, its maritime trade and its critical infrastructure. As the military command structure burns and the radar screens fade to black, the Pentagon is preparing for the most striking, most radical, and most lethal move in this entire scenario. A move designed to plunge a mechanized dagger directly into the beating heart of Iran's national wealth. But the most striking, most radical, and arguably the most lethal move in this entire classified scenario is hidden in an entirely different geographic coordinate. It is a special military operation aimed directly at seizing Karg Island. This is no ordinary patch of land. Karg Island is the absolute beating heart of Iran's hydrocarbon industry, serving as the solitary, indispensable hub for its global oil exports. Seizing it is not just a tactical victory. It is the equivalent of permanently and violently unplugging the Iranian state. Naval intelligence war games outline a textbook, multi-domain nighttime raid. Elite special forces, capable of silently descending on the island in the dead of night, are designated to secure critical oil infrastructure within seconds. A successful amphibious operation, backed by overwhelming close air support from above, would fundamentally deny Iranian defenses the crucial time required even to reach for their weapons. But a potential ground operation against this island would absolutely not be limited to lightly armed special forces alone. Once the multi-domain drone swarms and A-10 Thunderbolts have systematically eliminated the mine and fast attack boat threats in Hormuz, the true hammer falls. The U.S. Navy's massive landing ships, carrying heavily armored expeditionary units, would approach the shores of Karg directly. When those massive landing ramps drop into the surf, the invasion shifts from stealth to absolute shock and awe. M1 Abrams tanks, recognized as among the deadliest armored land vehicles in the world, could roar onto the island's sands with their turbine engines howling. The sheer kinetic force of the 120mm smoothbore guns on the Abrams possesses the raw firepower to mercilessly shred the last reinforced concrete bunkers and isolated pockets of Iranian resistance. Advancing rapidly alongside these titans, Bradley fighting vehicles would deploy. Utilizing their Tau missiles and 25mm chain guns, they would effectively flatten any remaining Iranian trench lines in a relentless wave of suppressive fire. In such a tightly coordinated, overwhelming scenario, every single road connecting the island's critical storage facilities and export terminals could be entirely cut off by rapid deployment armored vehicles dropped directly from the air. The visual of the American flag flying over the most strategic island in the Persian Gulf would declare the absolute, undeniable victory in the psychological war. It is one of the most highly risky, yet strategically desired moves currently resting on the Pentagon's table. While the intelligence community has historically weighed the intense geopolitical blowback, this persistently rumored potential operation against Karg Island has never left the active agenda. Furthermore, Another operational wave would simultaneously focus on Iran's offshore lifelines. The strategic oil platforms scattered across the Gulf, billion-dollar steel islands rising out of the sea, could be methodically picked off one by one with advanced anti-ship missiles, because halting offshore oil production entirely, concurrently with the seizure of Karg, would be the most lethal blow ever struck against Tehran's flow of hard currency. Hitting these platforms and taking the island is the final bullet fired directly into the regime's revenue streams. For that reason, the U.S. will absolutely not pass up this opportunity in the next operational wave. According to financial models drafted by geopolitical analysts, the physical fall of Karg Island would mean the Iranian economy being unplugged completely and irreversibly. The possibility of the United States seizing this specific island through an unexpected combined arms special forces and armored operation would instantly change the entire course of the war. The regime would be left with a shattered military and a permanently bankrupt treasury. So, as this colossal military apparatus tightens its grip and the Iranian economy flatlines into a state of terminal failure, a singular, terrifying question remains for the highest levels of global intelligence. So, how do all of these coordinated military and strategic pressures definitively corner Iran? The Tehran regime is rapidly approaching the absolute limits of its military capacity and endurance. Behind this tactical rout lies a far more devastating and shattering picture. The regime is now locked in a relentless war on two fronts, fighting advanced American bombardments on one side and confronting violent street uprisings from its own starving population on the other. The massive military apparatus that once struck fear into the entire region will inevitably begin to crumble from within, undone by the mutiny of soldiers entirely stripped of their logistical support. Iran, a nation which spent years confidently blackmailing the world from the very edge of this strait, is now watching its own helplessness unfold. Time is running against Iran, as merciless and swift as the currents of Hormuz itself. The United States has violently overturned the chessboard and is rewriting the rules of Hormuz. Now the eyes of the entire world are fixed on Iran, completely cornered and gasping for breath. So I leave you with this. Will Iran launch an all-out suicide attack in the face of this overwhelming and unprecedented American military force? Or will the regime raise the white flag at the negotiating table to save itself from total economic collapse? Could America's potential seizure of Karg Island ignite not just a regional defeat, but the spark of a new world war in the Middle East?